Welcome back. Now let's see section 13, time of supply of services. The liability to pay tax on services shall arise at the time of supply as determined in accordance with the provisions of this section. Again, the logic is same. We have to determine the time in order to calculate the liability, because the rate of tax will be as applicable on that date, and even the liability to pay will arise on that date. So for two purposes we calculate time. One is for rate, determining what rate will be applicable because rates keep changing also, and number two, the time of payment of tax. Okay, so let's see subsection 2. Time of supply of services shall be earliest of the following dates. Now again, as in the case of goods, subsection 2 here also refers to time of supply in case of forward charge. So first we'll see TOS in case of forward charge. Okay, so shall be earliest of the following dates. 3 dates are given and you have to take whichever is the earliest. Number 1, date of issue of invoice by the supplier. If the invoice is issued within period prescribed under section 31 subsection 2, section 31 is again invoice section. In that subsection 2 is for service, which says that invoice has to be issued within 30 days of provision of service. Within 30 days of provision of service. Or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Means if the invoice is issued within 30 days, then we'll see the actual date of invoice. Compare it with date of receipt. So issue of invoice or receipt, whichever is earlier. Simple. Invoice or receipt, whichever is earlier. In which case, where the invoice has been issued within 30 days of rendering the service. Okay. Now, if it is not issued within 30 days, then what? Then clause B applies. The date of provision of service. Date of provision of service. So, instead of issue of invoice, we'll take the date of provision of service. If the invoice is not issued within the period prescribed under section 31(2), or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. So receipt remains the same in both the clauses, but here we have to take issue of invoice, and instead of issue we'll take provision of service. Okay, so here there will be difference. So issue of invoice or provision of service is again accrual. The point of accrual, we'll compare the point of accrual with point of receipt and take whichever is earlier. Okay, so accrual we'll have to take two things, either or. If invoice is issued within 30 days, then issue of invoice. If not issued within 30 days, then the date of provision of service itself will be considered. Or the date on which the recipient shows the recipient to whom we have given service, the recipient shows the receipt of service in his books of accounts in a case where provision of clause A or B do not apply. So clause A or B do not apply means, again you can take various situations here like tax evasion. The supplier of service doesn't maintain any record, he doesn't give any invoice, he doesn't have any record of the provision of service, he doesn't have any record of receipt of payments, nothing is there. You find nothing with the supplier, then okay, you have to go to the recipient. I haven't given any invoice to you, for example, but you have recorded the date of payment, you have recorded entry in your books of accounts regarding receipt of service. So that entry in your books will be considered as my time of supply. Okay, so clause C is applicable in fraud cases, you can say. Normally A or B will apply. So let me explain this first. So let's take an example that this is the date of provision of service. I have provided the service to you. Now provision of service means the completion of service. Like in case of say tuition classes, the tuition class runs for 6 months. So when can you say that the service is provided? When it is completed, that is end of the service period. So provision of service means provision of completion date of service. So from here, this is period of say 30 days. Okay, so if invoice is issued within this time, then you will take invoice. And if provision is there, this is 30 days. And if invoice is not issued within 30 days but is issued later on, or maybe not issued at all, then we'll take the date of provision of service. So if an invoice is given within 30 days, then date of invoice. If not, then the provision of service. And any of these two things will be taken and then compared with the date of receipt of payment. Date of receipt of payment remains the same. If it is by cash, as we have seen for goods, if it is in cash, then cash. Date of receipt, the date when we enter into books. If it is by bank instruments like check, demand draft, etc., then we'll have to compare the two. Date of entry in the books of accounts or the date of credit in the bank account, whichever is earlier. Okay. So invoice will be compared with date of receipt. Here the provision will be compared with the date of receipt. And then take whichever is earlier. Simple? Understood? Very good. Then the proviso is on the same lines, that 1000 rupees extra. So most of the concepts are similar to goods that we have seen in the earlier lecture, section 12. So provided that where the supplier of taxable service receives an amount up to rupees 1000 in excess of the amount indicated in the tax invoice, the time of supply to the extent of such excess shall, at the option of the said supplier, be the date of issue of invoice relating to such excess amount. Absolutely same, dicto copy. So if I have received 1000 rupees more, then either we apply subsection 2, clause A or B as the case may be. So in that case the receipt will be earlier, advance receipt will be earlier, or we wait till the next invoice is issued and this extra amount is adjusted. So when that adjustment takes place, that will be considered as the time of supply. So let me take example again. So let's take an example that the best example of this is your mobile postpaid connection. Every month there is a billing cycle. First of all, there is a billing cycle, and on the completion of billing cycle they issue us an invoice, right? So one billing cycle is say completed on 13th of August. They give us an invoice on 16th of August, that is within 30 days. So very good. So we'll take the date of invoice. Now the invoice is of 1360 rupees, but you make a payment, the client makes a payment of 1500 rupees, that is excess of 140. So for this 1360, the time of supply will be simple, the invoice or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Okay, now this payment is made, for example, on 21st of August. So for 1360, for this 1360, the time of supply will be 16th of August. 16th August or 21st August, whichever is earlier, 16th August. But what about this 140? So this 140, as I have given example in goods also, may be of two types. Either I am going to refund it to you, or I am going to adjust it in the next invoice. Two things can happen. If it is refunded, then there is no question of GST. If it is adjusted in the next invoice, then yes, GST will be applicable. So then what will be the time of supply? So two options. Option 1, this is, I am excluding that refund option. If it is refunded, then there is no question of GST. So forget it. Option 1, invoice. So next invoice, suppose, in which I am going to adjust this amount, next invoice in which adjustment takes place, will be issued on, say, exactly the next month, that is 16th of September. But the receipt has already happened. When has the amount been received? 21st of August. So if we apply the normal rule, then we'll take whichever is earlier. So whichever is earlier will be 21st of August. So this will become time of supply for that 140 rupees. But as I told you, that this leads to practical problems, because when that 140 is received, how will the accounts be done, and the tax will be calculated and paid and so on and so forth? Who will keep all those records? So government says, okay, go for option 2. So in option 2, you take the next invoice date, that is in which this amount will be adjusted, that is 16th of September, as the time of supply. Simple. Don't take the advance receipt, just take the invoice date, 16th of September. Okay. So that's the proviso, and the explanation, 2 points in the explanation are also absolutely dicto copy, same to same. That is, the supply shall be deemed to have been made to the extent it is covered by the invoice or the payment. Means that part. If the invoice is made in parts, the total contract is of 20 lakh, but the invoices have been made in parts, or the payments are received in part, then each invoice or each payment will be considered as one service. Then the date of receipt of payment shall be the date on which the payment is entered in the books of accounts of the supplier, or the date on which the payment is credited in his bank account, whichever is earlier. Similar. Absolutely same, and we'll see the questions later on. So again, if I draw the small chart for this, then what all things we are going to consider? Time of supply of service under forward charge. Okay. So again, accrual, and receipt. So accrual is, it depends upon invoice, whether you issue invoice within 30 days, invoice less than or equal to 30 days of completion of service, or invoice after 30 days. So this is the shortest that I can write, within 30 days or beyond 30 days. So if it is within 30 days, then date of invoice. We'll take the date of invoice as the accrual point. If not, then we'll take provision of service. So accrual will be taken either as the date of invoice or the date of provision of service, one out of these two, and one of these two will be then compared with receipt. So receipt will be entry in books or credit in bank account, whichever is earlier. Okay, whichever is earlier, and then you will compare any one of these two with this receipt and take whichever is earlier. That will be your time of supply of service. So basically mean accrual or receipt, whichever is earlier. Okay, simple. So this is forward charge. We'll see the examples later on in the analysis part. Then comes the reverse charge, RCM. So what is the time of supply in case of RCM? Let's see. In case of supply in respect of which the tax is paid or liable to be paid on reverse charge basis, that is RCM, the time of supply shall be earlier of the following dates, namely the date of payment as entered in the account of the recipient, or the date on which the payment is debited in his bank account, whichever is earlier. So again, in reverse charge we sit at the recipient's place, right? So we are sitting at his place and then seeing when is he making payment. So for him the date of payment will be book entry vis-a-vis debit in bank account, whichever is earlier. Simple. Book entry of payment, book entry, or debit in bank account, because when we issue the check is cleared. So when it is cleared, it gets debited to my bank account. So whichever is earlier. This will be compared with the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice or other document by whatever name called in lieu thereof by the supplier. So in goods we used to consider three things. There was one more point, that was the date of receipt of goods. So we consider date of receipt of goods, then the date of payment or expiry of 30 days, right, for goods. In services, the date of receipt of service is not considered, because basically you don't know. Service is intangible. So when do you receive intangibles? You normally don't know. You don't record the receipt of intangibles. So therefore that part is gone. That point is gone. So we will not see the date of receipt of service. We will take the date of payment and compare it with 60 days. For goods it was 30 days from invoice. For service it is 60 days from the date of invoice. Means if I make the payment within 60 days of the invoice, then the date of payment will be taken. If I don't make payment till 60 days, then expiry of 60 days, the next day, that is 61st day, will become time of supply, and I will become liable to pay tax to the government. So even if I don't pay to the supplier, I would have to pay tax to the government on expiry of 60 days. So you can say the maximum credit period you are given for payment of tax is 60 days. Okay, so this also we'll see in problems. And the proviso then says that where it is not possible to determine time of supply under clause A or B, means we don't have the invoice, so we cannot count 60 days, and we have made payment in cash, nothing is recorded. So we don't get the date of payment, we don't get the date of invoice, so we cannot calculate 60 days. Then what? Time of supply shall be date of entry in the books of accounts of the recipient of supply. Whenever you have made the entry, the expenditure, you have recorded an expense of input service. So if you have recorded it, then you will be caught in this point. And provided further that in case of supply by associated enterprises, now this is a unique thing, this we haven't seen in goods. Okay, supply by associated enterprises, where the supplier of service is located outside India. Supplier is located outside India, means we are talking about import service. The time of supply shall be the date of entry in the books of account of the recipient of service, recipient of supply, or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. So we are going to compare two things. If the service is received from associated enterprise, books of entry in the books of accounts, or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. Okay, So let us understand this point very carefully. Let us take an example of import of service. So the supplier is located in USA and the recipient is in India. So anyways, when there is import of service, you apply reverse charge. Import of service comes under reverse charge mechanism, right? Good. Now, if they are non-associated, means they are not related to each other, they are not associated to each other, then what we'll do? Then we'll apply the normal rule. So the normal rule says that if payment is made within 60 days, then the date of payment. And if payment is not made within 60 days, then expiry of 60 days. That is the 61st day from the date of invoice. Right? So let's take invoice. So the invoice comes here. And the invoice date is, say, 1st of January. Invoice date is 1st Jan. Now, let us see when the payment is made. If this payment is made within 60 days, so 60 days means 30 days of January. First will not count, so counting will start from 2nd of Jan. So 2nd to 31st means 30 days. So for January there are 30 days. And February 28, so total will become 58. 1st and 2nd of March. So 2nd March is the 60th day. If 1st January is the invoice date, 2nd of March will be 60th day. Okay. So if the payment is made within that day, for example, 22nd of Feb, then 22nd Feb will become time of supply. And not made in 60 days, then 61st day, that is the time of supply, that is 3rd of March. So 3rd March will become the time of supply, expiry of 60 days. So 61st day is the time of supply. Okay, so this is the normal case where they are not associated to each other. And this will happen even in other cases of reverse charge. We have seen the whole list of reverse charge of services. Lawyer service, advocate service received by a business entity, and so on and so forth. We had seen the long list. So in that whole long list, this rule will apply. Okay, but now if these two persons are associated enterprises, then what will happen? Let's see. If they are associated, so I'll write here below that, if they are associated enterprises, then what will happen? Then we will not apply the 60 days criteria, whether payment is made within 60 days or not. No, not to be seen. What we will see is, okay, so there is invoice issued by the foreign party. The invoice is suppose issued on 1st of January. It comes here, and the recipient will record it in the books. So he records the book entry on 7th January. Okay, and then he makes the payment. So payment is made suppose on 17th of January. So we will compare two things: the book entry, the entry, the date on which it is entered in the books of accounts, or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. Book entry is not payment entry. This is of receipt of service. Service book entry means expenditure book entry, you can say. Expenditure book entry. So this 7 Jan or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. So here we will not consider that 60 days rule. It is the entry, book entry of service received or the date of payment straight away, whichever is earlier. Okay, great. Then come back. The next is vouchers. For vouchers it remains the same. If it is identifiable, then issue of voucher. Time of supply will be issue of voucher itself. Now this I had explained in much detail. So same logic applies here. Only the examples will change. Now the voucher will not be of Mercedes-Benz car, but it will be of something in service. So what kind of example can I give you? A spa. Yes. You have scored merit rank, and which rank? Beyond 25. So you have scored a rank, but any rank from 26 to 50. So your prize will be, the first ranker will get Mercedes-Benz, and then there are the prizes, and those who score more than 25th rank but up to 50, anywhere in between that, will give a spa treatment in India's best spa. 4 days, 5 nights total booking from my end. And don't worry, the cost is not less, it is 1,75,000. So the cost is 1,75,000. I'll book this spa center. It is somewhere in the Himalayas. So complete staying, lodging, boarding, everything, beautiful food, and all the spas, all the different types of spa treatments, completely gifted by Farooq Haque. So what I'll do, I'll book that spa treatment and then give it to you. So it is identified. We know that what kind of service you are going to enjoy. So as it is known, we know the rate also. So then the date of issue of voucher will be considered as the point of supply, the time of supply. Okay. And suppose if it is not known, we don't know what kind of service you are going to take. I am just taking a voucher from some service provider and giving it to you, and they provide thousands of different types of services. Now you can go and take any one of them. Then in that case, we'll have to wait till the time of redemption. Then the date of redemption will be the time of supply. So in case of identifiable service, we'll take the issue of voucher itself as the time of supply, because the rate is known. If the rate is known, apply it. And in all other cases means where it is not identified, means general vouchers. So these are specific vouchers, these are general vouchers. In case of general voucher, we'll wait till the time of redemption. Because only when you will go and redeem it, we will come to know what kind of service you are taking, and then we'll be able to find out the rate applicable. Okay, so the logic remains the same. The next case is where it is not possible to determine the time of supply under 2, 3 or 4. This is again the general one. Shall, in case where the periodical return has been filed, the date on which the return is to be filed. In any other case, the date on which tax is paid. So this is again tax evasion point. Whenever the assessment is done, we will take that rate and assess the tax. And the last point is the same: interest, late fee and penalty, those additional amounts which are recovered. The time of supply will be the date of receipt of such additional amount. Simple. And then see the analysis. So at the start they have given the invoice. When is the invoice required to be issued in case of service? As I told you, within 30 days. Within 30 days from the date of supply of service, you have to issue the invoice. In banking, for banks, you can write down banks and financial institutions and NBFCs, the time limit is 45 days for issue of invoice. They have to issue invoice within 45 days. Anyways, then the small table is given for forward charge, again explaining all those points which I have already explained. If it is issued within 30 days, then issue of invoice and date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. If not issued within 30 days, then provision of service or receipt, whichever is earlier. In other cases where you don't have these dates, that is, for example, unregistered supplier, the date when the recipient enters the service in his books, and for additional amount up to ₹1,000, the option to take the next invoice date when this amount, additional amount, will be adjusted. So all these points have to be remembered. And then a small the illustration, date of completion of service, that is the date of provision of service. An invoice date, so we'll see whether this is within 30 days of this. Okay, like in this case 10 and 20, is it within 30 days? Yes. So we'll take date of invoice. Then entry in books, this is payment entry, date of payment, receipt of payment, date of entry, receipt entry, and credit to bank account. So out of these two we'll take whichever is earlier. This will give us the date of receipt. So this is receipt, this is accrual. So 34 and 55, 34. So this is accrual, this is receipt, whichever is earlier, 24. 24 becomes time of supply. Second, 10/4/24, is it within 30 days? Yes. 34 and 26/4, 26/4. 20 or 26, 20. So simple. Then 10/4/15/5, is it within 30 days? No. So then we'll take date of provision, 10/4. Then see the receipt, 34, 28/4, 28/4. And then compare accrual or receipt, whichever is earlier, 10/4. Then 10/4/24, yes, within 30 days. 12/4/15/4, 12/4. 24/12/4, 12/4. And remember that notification which was there, that you don't take the advance into consideration, is only for goods, not for services. So in services we are going to take advance into consideration. So in this case there is advance receipt, and this advance receipt will become time of supply. No exceptions. Then next case is the part case. So 10/4/16/5. So invoice is 1, 16/5. So is this within 30 days? No. So therefore we'll take 10/4. 50% received on 5/4. Very good. So here we'll take 5/4. Or 3/4, whichever is earlier, 3/4. For this 50%. So here we'll compare these two, and the time will be whichever is earlier, means 3/4. For how much? For 50%. So for 50% it will be 3/4. Means if the invoice is of 1 lakh, 50,000 is received here. So for 50,000 the time of supply will be 3/4, 3rd of April. And for the balance 50% it will be 25/4 or 27/4, whichever is earlier, 25/4. And 10/4 or 25/4, whichever is earlier, will give us 10/4. So the balance 50% value, the time of supply will be 10th April. Similarly, the last one here, there are 3 different receipts. So first receipt, let's see, 4/4, 3/4, 3/4. 24, 22/4, 24. And 34 and 5/5, 34. So this gives us the receipt. Now compare this. 16/4 is the date of provision of service and 27 is the invoice. So is it within 30 days? Yes. So we'll take this. Now compare 27/4 with 3/4. So 3/4. And this will be for 30% value. Then 27 and 24, 24. This will be for another 30% value. And last is 27 and 30th, so 27. This will be for balance 40% value. Then here again continuous service is given, like we have seen for continuous goods. Let's see for continuous service. If the service is given on a continuous basis, that is any service which is given for more than 3 months is called as continuous service, or one which are specified by the government to be continuous. We have seen the definition, continuous service. Any service which continues for more than 3 months and where the money will be received on periodical basis. At the initial stage we don't know how much amount we are going to receive. It will depend upon the length of the service and the periodical. So money will be received on periodical basis. Then it is called as continuous service. So see the example. Continuous service means supply of service which is provided or agreed to be provided continuously or on a recurrent basis under a contract for a period exceeding 3 months with periodic payment obligations. This is important point. With periodic payment obligations. So that is the normal definition, and then followed by deeming fiction. Includes supply of such services as the government may notification specify. Government can also specify certain services which will be deemed to be continuous. So this is normal continuous, which is more than 3 months, and this is deemed continuous. Now what invoice section says about continuous service? Let's see. 31.5 says that in case of continuous supply of services where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of payment. Like for example, there's a long-term contract and it is given that you have to make payment on 7th of every month. You have to make payment on 7th of every month. Like in case of rental contract, rental of immovable property for commercial purpose. The rent is fixed. I have to pay rent to you on 7th of every month. So you will give me invoice on 7th of every month. Okay. So if the due date is ascertainable from the contract, contract says that you have to pay rent on 7th of every month, invoice shall be issued on or before the due date. So here there is no 30 days period. No 30 days. Invoice has to be given on 7th or before that. So you will issue invoice to me on maybe 5th or maybe 6th or maybe 7th, because 7th is the due date. So due date, you have to issue the invoice. Second point, that where the due date of payment is not ascertainable, means it is in the contract, it is not mentioned that you have to make payment on 7th of every month. No, it is not given. The invoice shall be issued before or at the time when the supplier receives the payment. So due dates are not fixed, but then I can make payment to you. If the due date is not fixed, so every month I will make payment to you sometime. Either I bring on 1st or I'll bring on 3rd or maybe 7th or maybe 10th or maybe 14th. It's as per my choice, because due date is not mentioned in the contract. So whenever I come with money, you have to give invoice to me. Simple. And third, where the payment is linked to completion of events, completion of event, the invoice shall be issued on or before the event is completed. For example, road construction contract. There are events fixed that every 5 kilometers which is constructed, I'll make an invoice. So I am a contractor, you are the government, I'm going to construct road for you. And the contract says that for every 5 kilometers, I'll make an invoice. So as soon as I complete 5 kilometers, I'll make an invoice. The next 5 kilometers, I'll make an invoice. Next 5 kilometers, I'll make an invoice. So those are called as events, stages. They are also called as stages. Or in case of building contract, as soon as one slab is done, I'll make an invoice. Percentage completion contracts. So likewise, there are a lot of examples here. So as soon as that event occurs, I have to make an invoice and give it to you. Okay. So that becomes the due date of invoice. The due date of invoice. And then we'll compare with the actual invoice. So So let's see. So let's see. The due date of invoice was 10th and I make invoice on 2nd. So we'll take 2nd. So we'll compare these two for invoicing, or else we'll take this date as the completion date, and receipt and entry in the books. Entry of provision of service in books. Okay, do we count this? No. Entry of provision of service in books is not to be counted. This will be seen only when these details are not available. But here they are available, so ignore this. So this is the receipt. So we'll compare this with this. So 2nd November and 15 November, whichever is earlier, 2nd November. Next, 17 December, 10 December. 10 December was the date as per the contract. So you should have issued the invoice here. This is called as completion of service, you can say. So we'll take 10 December and compare it with 15th. So we'll get 10 December. 10 January is the date as per the contract, and 10 January you issue the invoice. Very good. On or before you have to issue the invoice. So you have issued. Very good. And 6th Jan. So 10th or 6th? 6th. And then this is on completion of event basis. So event is completed on 10 November. You should have issued invoice on 10th, but you did not. So we'll take 10th and compare it with 25th. So 10th. Second, 24th April, 24th April, very good. So we'll take 24th. Compare it with 20th, the date of receipt. Whichever is earlier, 20th. Then there is one point given here, that how to determine the date of provision of service. Now this I had explained. You remember when we started with this section, that provision of service means the completion of service, because service normally takes time. Sometimes it will take 10 days, 15 days, 2 months, who knows. So it will always be the completion date. Completion date will be considered as the date of provision of service. So that is given here. Now this is an old circular which was applicable under service tax laws, but it will continue to apply in GST also. So the ministry had clarified that service under the service tax regime, White Circular number 13 by 2011, that the test for determination of whether a service is completed would be the completion of all the related activities that places the provider in a situation to be able to issue an invoice. Means when substantial part of the service is done, which affects the value of the service. So now I can make a bill, I can make an invoice that this is the amount that you have to pay. Now some small activity here and there may remain, but that's fine. So when a substantial part of the service is rendered, which enables us to raise an invoice to find out the value, that is called as completion of service. So that is an interesting notification, I mean circular. Then how to determine the date on which supplier receives the payment? Simple one. Entry or credit in bank account, whichever is earlier. Then if it is received in excess, then the same thing, that 1000 rupees. Very simple question. Then coming to reverse charge. Reverse charge is simple, date of payment or the 61st day from the date of issue of invoice. And what is the date of payment? Entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or when it is debited to his bank account, right? And if these two dates are not available, then what? date of recording of the supply in the books of accounts of the recipient. Then we'll see the date of recording of the supply, means the day when you book that expenditure. And for associated enterprise, date of entry or the payment, whichever is earlier. For that import of service thing, we had seen this in detail. So let's see an example on that. Date of invoice issued by the supplier. So from this we'll have to see 60 days. Date of completion of service, of no use. Payment, yes. An entry of service in the books of accounts of the recipient, no use. So we are going to see this and this, and the payment should be within 60 days. If this is within 60 days, then this, otherwise the expiry of 60 days means the 61st day will be considered. So let's see. 31st October is the date of invoice. Very good. Now these dates are very subject to, prone to errors. 31st. So from 31st you have to count 60, means 31st means counting will be done from the 1st of November. So November and December 30. So 60 days will expire on 30th of December. Have you made payment before that? Yes. So 20th November. Next, 31st October, 5th November. Is it within 60 days? Yes. So again 5th November. Though here it is written advance payment. Advance payment means it should have been even before that, but still no problem. Remove this advance payment. Then 31st October, 10th January. So this is after 30th December. So here we'll count 60 days. So 60 days will be 1st of November to 30th December. 60 days have gone and you have not made the payment. So the next day, 61st day, that is 31st December. Okay. Then next, 31st October, 5th April of next year. So this is also later. So again the same thing. Oh, but this is service received from associated enterprise located outside India. Oh, this is associated enterprise case. So in associated enterprise case, what we do is we take the book entry 31st March or the date of payment, whichever is earlier. So here we don't take that 60 days rule. So we'll compare this with this and take whichever is earlier. That will be 31st March. Great. And next is service by unregistered person, no payment made. Service by unregistered person to registered person. Reverse charge applies 9(4). Though 9(4) is not applicable right now, you all know, but still, let's see. So 9(4). So 30th November and 5th December. So as it is from unregistered, he has not given invoice anything. Nothing is given. So then date of entry in the books of accounts. This becomes the time of supply. No details available. Good. And then next is example of vouchers. Vouchers is very simple. You can do it. If goods are identifiable, then date of issue of voucher. If goods are not identifiable, then redemption of voucher. Very simple. Though issue of voucher is given, redemption of voucher is given. So you just compare. So see, in the first case it says voucher issued to a recipient after supply of service of a specific goods for the same service. Means you give one service and then you give a voucher to the other person that you can use this for the same service. So it is identified. If it is identified, then we'll take issue of voucher date 1st of November. Second, voucher issued to a recipient of machinery along at the time of delivery for availing repair services or specific goods worth rupees 5,000 valid for 1 year. So here also it is identified. It's identified. So again 1st of November, the date of issue of voucher. Because it is known that for what purpose you are getting the voucher. Third, voucher issued to a recipient after supply of service for any other service or goods across India. Any other service or goods. So we don't know. We don't know. At the time of issue of voucher, we don't know what he's going to use it for service or maybe goods. So therefore we'll wait. We'll wait till 14 December when he redeems the same. So date of redemption. Then gift voucher of 1500 for services or goods valid for 6 months. Now here again you can write specified services. It is specified. So therefore again the date of issue of voucher. And then the residuary is given. There is theory to be read and special charges. Very simple, both points. Great. So in this lecture we saw time of supply of services. Very important lecture. You have to read carefully. I hope 99% you must have understood, but only understanding is not enough. Now it has to be cemented. So you have to read it at least 3 times from the book, and if you find any problem anywhere, then watch that part of the lecture again. But at least 3 times you have to read so that the knowledge is cemented. Next lecture we'll see section 14. Very interesting lecture. What happens when the rates change? Suppose you have supplied the service or goods and then there is a change of rate and then you receive the payment. So then which date is to be considered as time of supply? Means, in simple words, the moot question is which rate of tax to apply? The earlier one, the old one, or the new rate? So that question we are going to solve tomorrow, I mean to say next lecture, in section 14.